All right. Look, welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for Powering Up Automation in 2023 with Power Automate. In today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on Power Automate and explore some of the key features and capabilities. We're also going to provide some insights on how you can leverage Power Automate to power up your own automation efforts in 2023 and beyond. At the end of this webinar, we aim that you'll have a clear understanding of how Power Automate can transform your business. We'll also have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So look, in today's fast-paced business world, automation, it really is no longer an option. It's kind of a necessity. And Power Automate gives you the opportunity to really streamline those processes, reduce costs, and drive productivity like never before. And with that said, I'd like to introduce you all to Oliver. He's our very own automation engineer and our guru in all things automation here at Roden. Ollie, I'll hand over to you now to take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. Hey everyone. As mentioned, my name's Oliver, and I'm an experienced automation engineer here at Roden. And as you might imagine, as an automation engineer, I'm working with the Power Platform and related technologies daily. I also have multiple Microsoft certifications relating to the Power Platform and quite a few years of experience now in the field. And have a pretty deep understanding of the capabilities and some of the limitations of the Power Platform. So and definitely one of my passions is helping businesses and transform some of their processes. So definitely excited to be here today and share my knowledge and expertise with everyone. So definitely want to, hopefully by the end of it, have provided you some insights and best practices that can help you successfully adopt and leverage the Power Platform so you can achieve your business goals. So with that said, the first thing to look into is the role of automation and the future of work. So automation is already rapidly transforming the way we work. There's countless ways that automation is changing our lives. You have autonomous vehicles, virtual assistants, Siri, Google, all of them, smart homes, just to name a few sort of examples that you might not really think are automation, but that they do fall into that category. So in the context of work, though, and business, there's some key points to consider. There's the increased efficiency, where automation can really help streamline those routine, monotonous tasks that no one actually likes doing, and reduce the time and effort that's actually required to complete them. And that really allows workers to focus on more complex and creative tasks, generally the ones that they like and enjoy, and can really lead to that increased productivity and innovation within your business. Automation also really helps the quality of work. It reduces the likelihood of human errors and inconsistencies. And not only that, it can also be used as a method of quality control and checking for potential errors that have been entered into data. So that really drives that improved quality. And then automation can also help reduce your labor costs, which can be especially beneficial to small and medium businesses. And automating those repetitive tasks, or just the time-intensive ones, you'll save on those labor costs, and that money can be reinvested in other areas of your business. So yeah, the role of automation really is, the impact it's going to be is significant if it already isn't. So there are concerns, obviously, around job displacement and impact on workers. But I truly believe that by embracing automation and adapting to its changes, businesses and workers can stay ahead of that curve and still remain competitive in their positions and in that increasingly automated world. So yeah, the next thing I kind of want to touch on before we get into some demonstrations is just a bit of an overview of Power Automate and its capabilities. Obviously, Power Automate, it's a cloud-based Microsoft service, and that allows users to create automated workflows between different applications and services. And with Power Automate, you can really automate those repetitive and manual tasks, streamline processes, and improve productivity that we were talking about in the last slide. So wanted just to touch on some of those key capabilities. Primary one to talk about is the connectors. Power Automate offers now over 700 different applications and services, and that number is truly only growing. Only 2 years ago, that number was probably closer to 300. So just in 2 years, we've grown 500 different applications into that list, and it includes obviously the Microsoft products that you would expect: Outlook, SharePoint, Teams. But there's a lot of third-party applications that have got connectors these days. So Dropbox, DocuSign, WebEx, Salesforce. That's just to name a few, but there's literally hundreds. So, and the advantage of having these connectors is there's no custom work that needs to be done. It's already been done for you, and it's easy to integrate with those different systems with those existing connectors. And Power Automate also offers a wide range of pre-built templates these days for generally pretty common business processes. There's invoice processing, lead management, approval workflows, just a few of those. But all the templates can be fully customized to fit your specific needs. It's just about saving that time and effort in building it from scratch. You can sort of start maybe 50 to 75% already done and just customize it that last 25%. So then we're talking about, what's involved in actually doing it. It's all a low code environment. Power Automate provides that because it knows that, the users that they want using this tool maybe aren't the most technical. And they want to be able to just foster that, being able to get users using their product without having that barrier to entry. So it's all a visual interface. You really don't need to have any coding skills. So it makes it easy for business users and to be able to build out their own automated workflows. In my experience, if you've got a decent understanding of just workflows as a whole and just being able to understand how a flow diagram works, then you're going to have absolutely no trouble whatsoever using the platform. And then, so obviously, what is Power Automate doing? It's automating your processes. So it allows you to automate a wide range, those approval workflows or filing documents. It can also be used for reporting. It really depends on what your needs are. And we'll get into a little bit later on being able to identify that kind of stuff. And so it's also used, obviously, for notifications and alerts. So it's not just as simple of it's doing something in the background and that's it. It can also really be used as a way of triggering emails or SMS messages to be sent to someone, or just running that full approval workflow where it needs to talk to, notify multiple people and trigger approvals and stuff like that. So it can really touch on a lot of things. So in summary, that is realistically what it provides. It's a wide range, and that can become a bit daunting. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, we've given you a bit more confidence in it, and you're a bit more comfortable with it. Let's jump into some demonstrations. The first one that we're going to look at is basically invoice emails to a SharePoint folder or list. That's not to say that you couldn't do it for a report email or just any other generic email that's consistently coming into your mailbox. In this example, we're obviously going to have a look at PDFs and putting them into SharePoint folders and also lists. But you could use any other document management system if you wanted to, Dropbox, Google Cloud, or even an on-premise file server if you've still got one of those. And SharePoint we've chosen just because it is the most common that we see out and about in the world, and it's got a few different ways that data can be ingested. So it's a good example to start with. So in this example, we're looking at invoices. Basically, we've got this tenant here, and they're receiving a demo invoice every month, every day. It doesn't matter the frequency. Obviously, the more frequent that you receive something, the better return you're going to get, because it's going to be completing that process more frequently for you. So this is just very basic, random PDF demo invoice here. It comes into the mailbox, and the user's going to have to normally, we're imagining a user is going to be putting that PDF just into a flat SharePoint file system, but they're obviously doing that manually without any automation. I'd say even if you're the fastest person at doing that, it's probably taking you at least a minute to download the file and then move it into the right SharePoint folder, regardless of how quick you might be. So to implement some automation to that, we've basically got this basic flow that all it's doing is waiting for an email to arrive into a mailbox that meets a few different conditions. That's fully customizable. So in this case, we want it to trigger if there's attachments, because if there's not, then there's nothing that needs to be done. And we're filtering on the particular subject. So in this case, we've just used this, the line there. You'd find that most generic emails that get emailed to you would have some way of identifying it as that generic email. And then all it's doing is grabbing, it's just going through all the files to find the PDF. So in this case, it's found the PDF here, and it saves that file into the invoice folder. So essentially from the user perspective, they've received this email, it'll be in their mailbox. But if they were then to go and have a look into their SharePoint folder where those files are being saved, they'll already see that that file's been automatically ingested and saved in that location. So for that flow to actually run, it's taken 3 seconds from when that email was received. So even if users really quick, we're talking, a massive saving in time. And it's also that the user hasn't actually had to do anything. So it's not having to wait for them to rock up the next day and do that step if maybe an overseas team is waiting for them to do that. So that's just sort of a basic example, but we can really build upon that as well. We're not stuck with just doing what the process already is. We can also improve upon the process. So obviously SharePoint has SharePoint lists where you can add some custom columns to track different parts of different pieces of data. So we have here an invoice number column, which we're extracting that invoice number from the email and adding into there. And then we're adding the invoice as an attachment to that line item. So again, that's fairly simple. And it is quite valuable in being able to now quickly just look for an invoice number instead of having to look at file names and stuff like that. The other advantage there is if your invoice comes in and it's just, invoice.pdf and it has no identifying information, you'd be able to then have that identifying information in a easy to see spot, and also not have a bunch of invoice.pdfs and not know which one is which. And then to go even a step further, in our email, you'll notice that we've got item and total. Just as a bit of an example, I've seen plenty of tables and stuff like that where there's more information that could be extracted from the email. So in this case, we've now got a SharePoint list that has an item, a total, and an invoice column. And essentially what's happening is we're filling out this information based on the information in the email body. So we've now got our item, the laptop, how much it cost, and then we're also just linking back to our previous SharePoint list of the invoice number. So from here, we can open up the laptop, and then we're able to go and have a look at the invoice directly if we wanted to, and just open that one up. So all about being able to simplify that process, and this to get a user to put in the item, the total, and the invoice, that might take even longer for them to do. So it's a really good savings there, and it's fully customizable. Doesn't have to be an invoice, doesn't have to be a PDF. Just any information that's in an email, and then you want to put it into some system. Maybe it's your CRM, maybe it is HubSpot, doesn't matter. It could be literally anything. If the connectors are there, it's really simple to set up something like that, which I think a lot of businesses can appreciate. So that's basically that particular example. And we've got a few others to go through. So the next one that we want to look at is an expense approval. So this one is probably the most common out of every business, that at some point someone's had to go and buy milk for the office or whatever else. It's very common to then have to go through an expense approval process. I know that from my experience in different businesses, sometimes there can be 5 different processes that the admin team is like receiving these kind of requests from. Like, they might be getting an email from someone might just give them a receipt and write on it. It can be quite challenging for the admin person to keep up with all those different ways of being told. So obviously just formalizing a standard approach is invaluable to this kind of flow. But even more so, being able to automate as much of it as possible is even more valuable. So we'll run through this one. We're just going to start it with a basic Microsoft form in this example. So this is our expense approval form, quite simple. Provide the expense description, total cost, payment method, and upload a copy of your receipt. Basically all the information that sometimes comes through a bunch of different channels. So easier just to have it in one form. It's easier for like me as an employee having to just open up a form, enter my data, and it's easier on the admin team because they're getting it consistently in the same way. Basically in our flow, we've got the form gets submitted, we get the details of what was in the form. We do a little bit of parsing, so just grabbing that information and making it a bit more easy to be read. It's pretty simple to set up. And then we're just doing some more. So this get user profile is to make it a bit friendlier. So we can just use their first name or their display name instead of just referring to them by their email address. And we start an approval. This is a built-in functionality within the Power Platform, within Teams. So just realistically, it's just a Microsoft process. In this case, we're just waiting for anyone to respond. I've only put in this account as who it's assigned to, but you could assign it to 3 different people and all members of the admin team. And then whoever first gets to read it and review it can approve or reject it. We also pass through the details from that form. So that person that gets to review the approval, they don't need to go and look in other places to actually know if they should approve or reject it. It's all in one place, in one portal. So if we go ahead now, we're going to just say that the expense was milk because the office ran out. Provide the total cost, $5. They've used their work card to complete the transaction. And then we've just uploaded a copy of that receipt. Now, all these questions, they might be different depending on your business. I know some like to split up. They want to see the total cost and then, or maybe they just want to see the subtotal and then GST is separate. All of those questions here can be customized and we can totally change that depending on your needs. So once this one gets submitted, it's going to execute this expense approval flow and it's going to be waiting on that approval step. So it's not going to go ahead and try to do the stuff after the approval. It does stay and wait here. And so this account is going to receive a notification in Teams saying, hey, you have a new approval to take a look at. In this case, it's an expense approval for this user and it's for milk. So then again, it's got all those details that we were talking about in the form and they come through to that person. So from here, they can reject or approve. If it's just a simple reject, then that's basically the end of the flow. All that happens after will be a message to the user that put in the submission, and they'll be asked to like, hey, we can build out that flow further so that that person can then respond back. But in this case, it's just the terminating. That's the end. However, if we approve it, next step that happens is still also the user will receive a message saying, hey, your expense has been approved. That's this message here. Your expense has been approved. And then we're actually adding all that information into a HR approved expenses Teams channel. This could be an email if you want it to fit into your existing process, or it is customizable to how you want that data to be provided to the relevant team. At Teams these days, everyone's in it, living and breathing it for most of the time. So this person will get a notification if they're tracking this team that, hey, new expense, and then the detail of who requested it, who approved it, if there's any approval comments, and just those original details. And then if we want to track all this data holistically, so maybe you want to be able to then run reports on how many expenses there were and all that kind of stuff, which maybe you can do currently in your systems, but if you can't, then this is like a great value add. In here, basically all those same details that we've just been talking about with the attachment for that receipt. And if we go back, we can actually see all of the different expenses that have been provided at different times by different users. So this is where you'd be able to start being able to build some reports on this data. And again, all these columns, expense, status, description, et cetera, all of that fully customizable to your needs. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an expense approval, but maybe you have an internal process where employees need to ask, they need a new chair for their home office, or they need a new mouse, or they need some batteries, or whatever you need. It doesn't necessarily need to be an expense approval, but any type of approval, you could build this kind of system around and be able to start getting, I guess, that tracking of what's happening, better oversight than just this person got a message or that kind of stuff. There's way more tracking in this kind of system. So that's just another example of the Power Platform being able to run as the orchestrator, more or less. It's been able to run all these steps, and we haven't had to rely on the admin team to make sure that they're responding to every request. We're relying on the automation to do that. So, and they don't have to chase someone down to get all the details. It's all in one kind of place for them, which I know that they all really do appreciate. So yeah, that's that particular demonstration. And the final one that we're kind of looking at is a new user onboarding. This one's probably the most time-consuming part for most businesses. Is they have a new person starting, and then they have to do all the different steps to fully onboard them. It's a huge process for most businesses, and there's just so much time saving that can be implemented. We're only really scratching the surface in this particular demonstration because it is so custom for every business. Every business onboards someone differently. I've yet to see a business that does it the exact same as one another. With things that we've done in the past, planner boards and just documents and checklists and all that kind of stuff can work pretty well. But even with them, you'll end up someone's forgotten one particular step, or maybe they weren't set up in that application when they needed to be. And so now they've started and it's a week later, and that person that would normally set up the accounts on leave. So now this person can't get into MyOb or whatever else until that person comes back. Or it's just little things like that, maybe it is only a 5-minute thing, but missing that 5-minute thing can then have quite a lead on effect to that person's onboarding. And definitely just, when you started a business and someone's not set up your account yet, you might feel like, oh, this is a bit of shambles. And that's not the case. Everyone makes little mistakes, but that's why we implement automation, to just avoid that. And everyone is super happy and has the best experience, basically. It is all about just streamlining, essentially. So in this demonstration, we'll have another form for someone starting. So again, all these questions are totally customizable. We've kept it really simple for this demonstration. But if you wanted to have in here a checklist of like, I want this person to have these applications or all that kind of stuff, we can fully customize it to any kind of need. So just create John Smith and set their start date to be on June 1, and they're going to be in the sales team. So that's generally, this form would be completed by the relevant partner, manager of that department, but it could be completed by maybe whoever you want, and we can just customize who has access to the form. And at this stage, the first step that happens in this particular demonstration is that HR is notified in Teams again, like, hey, new staff member starting for this department, can you follow the onboarding process? And we're just assuming that at this point, now a letter of offer needs to be sent to this person that is onboarding with the company. So once HR has sent that letter of offer, they come back into Teams and they hit complete. But we could also fully automate that process. So if that HR program that you use already has a Power Automate connector, we could build that in, that after an approval process, that letter of offer automatically gets sent out. Obviously, you'd have a lot more details in the form, but there is the ability to do that. So HR has less involvement. In this case, we're just doing it a little bit manually. Once that's sent, HR gets another response here that's like, okay, cool, letter of offer has been sent, but now we need to know what the response is. Again, this could be automated depending on your system. In the manual sense, though, we just need an accept or reject from the HR team and what that new employee's response was. So If they reject, again, our terminating is just to notify the original requester to say, hey, they've rejected the offer. But if they accept it, we then move into the next stage, which is an automatic notification to a new staff or an all staff channel saying like, hey guys, there's a new team member joining us. This is their details. It's always good to let everyone know. And it's good to just automate that. So it's, another one of those little things that you don't have to think about and it just happens. Then we're going to contact the application owners. So in this case, we're using MyOb and Xero, just every employee needs that as an example. And those relevant teams are going to get a message saying, hey, this person is starting and a MyOb account is going to be required for them. Once it's configured, just hit complete. So once the MyOb person does that, we're now still waiting for the Xero account to also have been configured for that person. So once that's also complete, a final message will go to the original requester saying, hey, your person's been set up. So here you can see the whole process. The original requester is updated. They're not left knowing, or they don't have to necessarily go and hassle HR about where something's at, because they've received a message saying, oh yeah, your letter of offer has been sent to your new staff member. They've accepted your offer, and the application owners have created those appropriate accounts for the new user. So now when John comes into the office on his starting day, he's got MyOb, he's got Xero, and all that back-end process has kind of been completed. So it's a very simplistic look at this one. So the flow is quite simple for it. Again, we're just using all built-in functionality. None of this is custom, and you really don't need to have any coding experience. So the workflow is essentially, we get the form, we get the responses. We get some user profile information just to make it a bit friendlier. We're then utilizing Teams to wait for a request of letter of offer to be sent. And then once we receive that update, we send that through to the original requester. And then we're waiting on a response for if they accept or reject. And now we have a fork of basically, if they accept, do these steps, and if they reject, do that, do just a message to the original requester. And from here, you can see that we have the letter of offer has been accepted message goes to the requester. We notify all the teams, and then we have a fork here again, where basically we're waiting to receive confirmation of the MyOb account and the Xero account. And we don't go ahead notifying the original requester that these have been configured until both conditions have been completed. So that is just a real simplistic look, but infinitely customizable to what you need. You could have 20 applications and 20 different departments that need to be notified. If you're huge, like a massive organization, or you may just have 3 or 4 applications, different people set up those accounts, or even the same person, and being able to notify them. And there's other steps that you can also add into this. Maybe you want a step for the actual onboarding document on the day to, you run them through fire safety and all the exits and all that kind of checklist items. You could have that as another confirmation box that needs to be confirmed by someone once it's complete. So yeah, it is an infinitely customizable type experience. So yeah, that's all the demos that we have today. Hopefully that sort of gives you an insight to what you can start to expect in the Power Platform. But I guess from that, we really want to talk about the best practices for successful automation to help you when you start to come up with these ideas, how you can best implement them. And it really comes around successful automation. It requires that careful planning and execution. So yeah, we want to discuss those best practices. And realistically, if you follow these, you'll end up with a great experience, and you won't have any trouble. So before automating any process, it is really important to identify the right processes to automate. People can get too stuck on something that maybe isn't the right fit, because not every process is going to be that right fit for automation. So yeah, a business really needs to identify processes that are repetitive, manual, and time consuming. They're the big 3 things to look for in a process. So you don't want to do something that is already pretty automated and takes no time to do. You want to look for things that are pretty manual and quite time consuming. And you want to prioritize depending on what's going to give you the most value. So being able to identify that at the start is really good. And also don't necessarily think that there's only one process that you can do. It could be 20, and you want to just be able to pick the most valuable one. The other part is once you have identified those right processes, it's important to design a clear and efficient workflow. So it needs to be really easy to understand for everyone. It should be well documented and designed to optimize that efficiency. Involving all the stakeholders in the design process is essential, to make sure that it meets the needs of everyone. And it's not just helpful for HR, but it's also helpful for the managers that are going to be, submitting a form or something like that. And the other part is to use the appropriate automation tools. So Power Platform provides a range of tools. It's not just Power Automate. There's also the Power Apps and Power BI. And it's important to select the appropriate tool for each automation need. And Power Automate, from what we've been talking about, is obviously it's best suited for that process automation. And that's really where you'll find most value. But Power Apps, they're suited if you're building a custom application. And Power BI, obviously, anything reporting and analytic related, it's the tool to look into. And then once you've done the workflow, you've designed it, and you've implemented it, it's important to actually monitor and optimize it regularly. So a lot of the time we'll find that people implement these flows and they're perfect for the first 3 months. And then they may come back and they're like, oh yeah, we've also noticed that there's this issue with it. We're not quite tackling this problem, or there's a bottleneck because we're having to wait too long on this person, and we could actually have other people doing parts whilst we're waiting on the other one. So it's important to definitely review and improve the efficiency of it over time, and not just to implement it and then never look at it again because it's doing a decent job, because it could always be doing a better job potentially. And you don't want to leave that just on the table as something that you're missing. And Power BI is really good for being able to monitor the performance and review some of the data-driven decisions on how to optimize it. So yeah, following all those best practices can ensure that you end up with successful automation with the Power Platform. And it's really where you're going to be able to make sure that you're getting the most improvement, productivity, efficiency, and cost related. And from there, the next thing, I guess, everyone kind of asks is like, what are the barriers to entry of the Power Platform? We've talked about a bunch of different things, and obviously the Power Platform, it's a super powerful set of tools, but maybe there's some worry. So just to put some of them aside, like some potential challenges that arise in implementation. These are kind of the most common barriers to entry that you might end up experiencing. And it's really important just to understand these, not only so you can then overcome them, but also just to ensure that you have successful adoption within your teams, and you get to realize those significant benefits that it has to offer. So the Power Platform, obviously, we've talked about all the range of tools and features that it has, and it can be a bit overwhelming. Like we've talked about a lot of stuff, and businesses potentially will lack that technical expertise to use it effectively. So businesses may need to invest in training or hire external expertise like ourselves to help fully leverage the capabilities of the Power Platform, if you don't feel like you have that technical expertise. Integration with legacy systems. So obviously many businesses will have something from 10 years ago, 5 years ago that just exists because it's been like that for 5-10 years. And sometimes they might not necessarily integrate with the Power Platform. So it can be a complex and time-consuming process when legacy systems are like outdated or not designed for integration. So it's helpful to recognize that early on, so you don't get disappointed that it may not be possible, or that it's a bit more of an involved process than just going in, using a template and being done within an hour kind of thing. And finally, businesses really face resistance to change from their employees, who generally might be accustomed to the existing processes and systems. Like change can be scary, especially when you mention automation. People are worried like, oh, like you putting me out of a job. So all of those kind of concerns can really be addressed through effective change management and just making sure that you really communicate and train staff and sort of bring employees along with you on that journey to fully understand the benefits to the Power Platform and they're comfortable with that transition. Always the old adage of catching more with honey instead of other things. And if you tell employees, hey, you get to do more of the fun stuff that you love doing, we're just getting rid of this boring process that you don't like doing, you'll generally have a much better time. So yeah, that one is really probably the most important of all the three, to really recognize right up front with your staff. And yeah, as long as you execute all of that, you'll be able to get the significant benefits out of the Power Platform. So yeah, that's really all of my part. So I'm going to hand it back over to Lee to go through the rest.
Hey, Ollie, look, thanks so much for taking us through the automation opportunity with Power Automate and showcasing us some of those simple use cases that we could potentially all use and adapt in our own businesses. And of course, as you said, that really is just the beginning of what is possible and the opportunities to, whether it's streamlining processes, improving efficiency, or just reducing that manual work, they really are limitless. And hopefully that's got you all today thinking about some of the ways that you can get started with process automation yourselves. What's the best way to get started? Look, you can actually get started right now. You can log into Microsoft 365 or set up a Power Automate account and get started with any one of the hundreds of pre-built templates or connectors. But if you have something a little bit more complex, or maybe you don't have the resources to do it yourself, or not really sure about what's possible, that's where Ollie can come in and help, and he can advise you on what's possible. He can design and build tailored automations that can deliver on the outcomes you're looking for in a way that, as you mentioned before, is designed efficiently. And of course, by using that Power Automate platform is that it doesn't require extensive coding or IT resources. So generally, these things can be built at a relatively low cost. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about capabilities or talk about your own process automation project, please do reach out to us. Otherwise, we'll open up for if there's any questions. You can use the Q&A section there, and Ollie will do his best to answer them for you. Just while we're waiting to see if there are any, Ollie, are there any sort of prerequisites required for using Power Automate? What do we need to get started? Yeah,
so realistically, anyone who has a Microsoft account, you can go and open Power Automate right away. You can already start to look at those templates. You can look at the connectors and start building stuff on your own. There really is like no huge difficulty in terms of licensing or anything like that. Microsoft really are pushing the platform, and it is a lot of the templates and those connectors are around making the best experience for the end user, and to get non-technical staff members involved. That's where Microsoft see the most growth in this kind of automation type platform. So that's definitely the best way to get involved, is to actually just test it. I find definitely going to understand it a bit better and be able to answer your own questions if you have had a chance to play around with it and actually see it in action for your own type of situation.
Easy. Thanks, Ollie. And finally, we do have one more. Just what is the learning curve for using Power Automate, and do I need previous experience with coding of any kind?
Yeah, so the learning curve, it's super simple. It's all low code. It's all visual code, little blocks that you can see. There's no actual code that you see, but just sort of little questions that are, can you provide the email to and from it? It's super structured in that way. And I've yet to find someone who's actually had trouble outside of it. It's really being able to come up with the process and that aspect of it. Are you able to fully understand the business process that it is, and could you build a flowchart for it? if you can build that flowchart, you probably have zero issues whatsoever. But if you struggle with that, then it's probably better to engage someone to help you implement something.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, thanks again. We'll wrap it up there.